ever feel that you're running, could be running away from something, running to something? This story, and I love this story. It talks about someone who's running, but more specifically, he's running away from situations. He's running away from things that he's done, and a lot of us could relate to this. Things happen in our lives, and sometimes we don't deal with them in the moment. Sometimes we run, or sometimes we avoid. It doesn't necessarily have to be the physical running away, like I'm running in that moment, but avoiding it or putting it aside or not dealing with things. And eventually what happens is that those things catch up with you, just like in this story. But I think God does it on purpose because there's a special lesson that I think we can take out of this story and maybe apply it to our lives that will help us or those of us that run. The story is taken in the book of Genesis, first book of the Bible, and it's the story of Jacob. And I'm just going to read a little excerpt. It says, Genesis 32 and verse 22, reading from the English Standard Version, it says, "The same night he arose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. And he took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had. And Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, 'Let me go, for the day has broken.' But Jacob said, 'I will not let you go unless you bless me.' And he said," and this is the key part, verse 27, "and he said to him, 'What is your name?' And he said, 'Jacob.'" Now I know where I started off, and it might not make sense, but I'm going to try to tie it all together. So we know the story of Jacob, and if you don't, you can go back to chapter 25, and you can start reading 24 actually, and start reading about Jacob and what happened through him and all that he went through. But the thing that I want to focus on specifically is that Jacob is wrestling, and I want you to see the scene. He's wrestling with God. He's wrestling with God, and the scene is that he's trying to fight, and it's easy to determine based on what's said in the Bible. It says just with one touch, his hip was dislocated. So meaning that the person that he was wrestling with was more powerful than him. The wrestling match started initially, but that person overpowered him. God overpowered him. So let's see the setting. The setting is that it's dark and he's wrestling because he doesn't know who he's wrestling against. And it's only after when he recognizes the power, when he recognizes the authority, that's when he realizes who he's wrestling with. And Jacob in the story says, "I'm not going to let go of God until he blesses me." But the thing that Jacob didn't realize, and when it comes to that verse that I read in verse 27, "What is your name?" he asked him. God asked Jacob, "What is your name?" If we think back to the story of Jacob, and when you're reading the story, it's going to stand out to you more. But there was a point in the story where Jacob deceived his father. This situation that he's in, it's dark, it's low light, he's wrestling, and the person that he's wrestling with asks him one question: "What is your name?" Think back to when he was brought before Isaac, his dad. It was dark. And you remember they put the hair on his forearm so that when he touched, it was low light, he couldn't see. So same type of situation. It wasn't wrestling, but it was a situation where the first thing, what did Isaac ask? "What is your name?" Jesus in that moment brought Jacob full circle back to that initial moment where he went astray. The thing that he was running from, because obviously, as we know, as the story goes, that moment basically set the stage for why he had to start running. Jesus sometimes will set up things in our lives that will bring us back full circle. But ultimately, as he asked Jacob here, he's asking you and he's asking me, what is your name, Warren? The story goes on to read, verse 28. It says, then he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God. Or in other versions, it says, for you have fought against God and you have prevailed. God right now is asking us, what is your name? Not for the purpose of knowing who you are or saying, but he wants you to recognize that he brought all of this full circle. Stop running. I need you to own up to what it is that you're evading. And I'm asking you, what is your name? Because I want in that moment you to tell me what's your name so that as in the story of Jacob, he can change it. Changing Jacob's name from Jacob to Israel was giving him new life, was giving him a new beginning. And God wants that in our lives too. He wants to give you that start, but right now he's asking you, what's your name? Stop running and answer to God's call. Be blessed.